Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
All right. So, with this we enter into the second part of the lecture on European urban environmental history. We would be basically discussing the recent advances, the recent research directions in European urban environmental history, and I will basically take you through a tour, a historiographical tour, discussing three major works which I think are quite influential and which of our recent times. So, you can see that the two volumes by Homan and Van Wabel, these two books were published last year, and the volume edited by Swayam et al. It was published, Urbanizing Nature was published in 2019. And all the chapters that are there, the book chapters that are there in this edited volume, so Van Wabel is not an edited volume, but the other two are. So, and it's a very fascinating, rich and robust compilation shedding light on multiple perspectives of or on European urban environmental history, and where historians, they have not only limited their methods and methodologies so far as history or historical scales are concerned, but definitely they have integrated, they have borrowed, and they have also informed frameworks and paradigms of other frameworks and paradigms, including environmental justice, environmental humanities, political ecology, etc. So, definitely I would have my own arguments and analysis when I take you through this historiographical ride. So, the first book that I would like to discuss is Urbanizing Nature, Actors and Agencies. So, please also concentrate on the title and on this particular part, Actors and Agencies, Disconnecting Cities and Nature since 1500. So, a long temporal scale, and also it shows that how historians also definitely borrowed from the actor network theory, and also like the discussion surrounding this major question on agency. Who are the agents, who are the key players, who are the actors, who are the actants who keep reshaping this urban environment, and in turn get shaped very much by this multi-layered and complex and deep processes. So, this book, the several chapters in this book, and if you also go through this editorial introduction, you will find that how these editors, they set this particular argument that city is nature. City is nature. So, the first argument is that of course, they are not antithetical, and how a city is actually nature, but then how cities also change nature along its very own history, along particular histories of particular cityscapes, and vice versa, how nature also change cities, and how these these processes should combine and comprise urban environmental historical trajectory to explain particular cities and their urban environmental interactions. So, this book is very significant in terms of addressing the issue of hybrids or hybridity. The editors ask that, is demonstrating hybridity the role of a historian? And then they say yes, of course, because historians they are adept, they are equipped to provide temporal scales to socio nature hybrids, and this temporal analysis also remains so very significant in terms of understanding how apparatus and arrangements in urban site kind of co-constitute each other. So, for example, on this particular topic or the question of hybridity, there is a book chapter in this particular book by Eva Jacobson, and Jacobson has worked on on water in Stockholm, and across a very long term temporal scale. And she says, for example, that water, she discusses how water has been modified and how humans they have altered water in Stockholm in order to cater to some fundamental needs, like for example the construction of flood protection measures, and to cater to transportation needs, and also sometimes how water also kind of has been manipulated to make way to beautification, city beautification, etc. But then the major point she raises is that human altered water, but water was not quote unquote waiting out there to get modified and manipulated by human beings. So, by this she then makes us aware of the agential attributes of water. So, water also has agency, water also had agencies. So, when humans started altering water, humans also they did not really have control on all the microcosmic or kind of microscalar processes, so far as geophysics or so far as hydrological components were concerned. So, a whole lot of hydrological and geophysical components remain which were beyond the control of human beings or human agencies. So, she does not use hydrosocial, she does not use this particular terminology, but I myself, when I go through the work, I definitely find a whole lot of the essence, the hydrosocial essence there in her historical analysis of urban waters, so far as the Stockholm city is actually concerned. Now, this book again it definitely exposes us to urban metabolism, but more importantly metabolic externalization. So, I told I discussed, I mentioned earlier in my last lecture that how urban metabolism is such a fundamental tenet in European urban environmental history. And here in this particular book, Urbanizing Nature, there are book chapters that actually discusses this metabolic externalization by European cities, and it is such an and these European historians make us so much aware about so very aware about these externalization costs, at the externalization cost at the cost of at the expense of urban development. So, what are the costs of this urban development? Why it is important for urban planners and experts to remain extremely careful about this externalization or externalization costs. So, for example, I just remember that there was a survey which was published which just showed there was a report actually which in 2002 which showed that how the ecological footprint, urban footprint of London was 300 times more or beyond its own periphery. So, one can imagine the kind of implications that this urban development actually have on its wider environment. So, this is again a very important theme in European history, and the various case studies that are there in this particular book discuss this in different ways, in different manners. And as these are different case studies, so we become more aware of the very many ways through which this metabolic externalization actually takes place or took place. So, flows, inputs and outputs that I think that Rees and Walker-Nagel, their works make us very aware about this ecological footprint, and they said that how it should be calculated. So, it should be calculated as a land from where a city derives its inputs in the form of food, other raw materials, water, woods, other substances, etc., and also the land which is there to absorb the city's footprint. So, the outputs of the city, so where the city can actually dispose its wastewater or sewage. And ecological footprints, as I mentioned, of course, the urban ecological footprint, they the spatial scale is far flung, far stretched, and much beyond its urban limit, much beyond their urban limits or urban territory. So, there are case studies in this book. So, for example, there is a book chapter which discusses how this deep forests in alpine mountain regions were opened to large scale modern infrastructures, and how tunnels were constructed on mountains, and canals were excavated for logging, and I mean the change that deep forests underwent due to these modern transformations, and how wood cultivation was also, how wood cultivation was kind of encouraged, and how all these were very much kind of tied to the needs of the distant urban markets. So, there is an article by Dieter Scott himself in this book that discusses this. Then there is again case studies which show that how Lake Merlin near Stockholm was absolutely tamed and manipulated to cater to the utility needs of the city of Stockholm. So, now the fascinating part of this book, or why I really enjoyed reading this book is the fact that the editors and the authors, they consider cities as socio-ecological system, but they also sensitize us to the limits of this particular restricted reductionist perception, that cities should be understood and viewed as socio-ecological system, but at the same time if we only perceive cities as socio-ecological system, then we blind ourselves to the processes, to the actors who play a very important role in socio-ecological metabolism. So, metabolic externalization is very much imbued with power equations and asymmetries, and I think here these historians have to a great extent been influenced by, and they have derived from political ecologists, and all of us definitely know the works by Eric Singeru, the Belgian geographer and scholar, who made us aware how that cities should be understood as a socio-natural site imbricating these hierarchies and power equations. So, and this metabolic externalization is also not something which is constant, it keeps changing across temporal and spatial scales, and the degree of metabolic externalization varies, and it matters not only along the scale of the city, but also several other variables and factors like amount of internal recycling of resources, the size of the hinterland, because the hinterland is so important because the city derives input from the hinterland and disposes or the hinterland also absorbs the outputs. So, the size of the hinterland along with the size of the city and the density of population also matters. But again, not only restricted to this, because only if we restrict our understanding to these ideas, then again we derive linear conclusions. So, which is not the case with European urban environmental history, very fortunately, because it has become so very nuanced in recent times. So, they also discuss the historians also discuss specific historical conditions and actors and particular spatial dimensions that make the urban environmental trajectory of particular city so very unique and different from the rest. So, for example, in this book there is again this work by Dieter Scott, where Dieter Scott says that how in 1900 gas works, electricity, with the introduction of electricity, there was an understanding that that the gas works will actually be replaced. But this actually did not happen so far as German cities are concerned. And why did this not happen? Because the commercial and the commercialized and private gas production or gas producing lobbies, they were so powerful that they could really convince, and they could promote and sell the idea that why gas works were more relevant to be used for heating and cooking purposes. So, we see that in German cities, actually most of the German cities, electricity, modern electricity actually could not replace gas works. So, the actors, the lobby played such an important role. Then also the historical works, this historical urban environmental historical scholarship also make us aware of the inherent conflict between the universal aspirations of technologies and the local socio-natural context. So, why the local? Why place is so important, right? So, there has to be a place based narrative, place based historical narrative, so far as particular places or particular cities are concerned. And then again this book has a particular chapter by Carol David, where on hydraulic expertise and hydraulic experts, and on the transplantation of technologies, and what kind of different implications what kind of different implications actually the cities were exposed to when these technologies were transplanted from Europe. So, and the technologies, not only this modern infrastructures not only kind of shaped European cities, but of course, as Europe had colonies. So, the colonial cities also definitely they were exposed to the implications and impacts of technology transplantation, and this is something which we will definitely discuss a lot when we discuss South Asian history in the next chunk. But yes, I was discussing this article by or the book chapter by Davids, who it's a book chapter that sheds light on 3 case studies. So, how a lake was drained in the city of Mexico and what happened. Then the kind of urban environmental fate that Batavia was exposed to, and also what happened when Philadelphia became networked. So, these 3 fascinating case studies, and we can understand that why the local, why place based historical narratives are so very important so far as urban environmental history is concerned. And European historians really have done a fascinating job so far as these place based historical narratives are concerned. So, yes, the book chapters in this particular book, Urbanizing Nature, is also important because it absolutely kind of validates how actors are responsible for changes in the city nature nexus, and the actors also operate in particular socio-political and socio-natural configurations. So, any activity in a city should be understood as a networked activity, amid socio-natural, socio-political, socio-technical and socio-material settings. So, and this networked activities they also remain kind of inseparable to the wider networks of the surrounding world. So, this is a key idea that I think the book chapters have been able to successfully place before us. Finally, today if you see environmental humanity scholarship, so multi-species intersectionality is such a key theme, such an important theme. So, gone are the days when we used to understand human agency as intentional actions by humans. So, Anthony Giddens, for example, I remember Anthony Giddens and Max Weber, who talked about this intentional actions by humans. But now we know that how our human agencies, how our agencies remain so very limited, and why it is important for us to kind of enlarge the agencies from human to the non-human world. Why and how it is important for us to engage ourselves with this more than human entanglements. So, I think again this book really has done a good job in terms of making us understand why a city should be understood as a conglomerate, as a messy assemblage comprising the mix of human actors, non-human actors, as well as power relations which bind them together. So, finally, another major thing that I would really like to discuss when I am now trying to kind of wrap up the discussion on this particular book, Urbanizing Nature. So, I think again the book chapters is very significant, because it says that yes, modern period or modern so called modern infrastructure can be regarded as a watershed period, but it is also important for historians to look beyond this quote unquote modernity, because there are, I mean, non-linear continuities. I will give examples from the book itself, which will validate my point, or the point by which has been put forward by the editors in this volume. So, why it is important for us to go beyond linear chronologies, like pre-modern and these 2 or 3 centuries, 3, 4, 5 centuries dedicated to that period. Then modern period with the industrial revolution, because of course there was a significant transition, there was a significant energy transition when there was a transition to the fossil fuel, so to the fossil fuel energy. But then is it right, is it absolutely correct to kind of understand things from this kind of linear chronological perspective, or is it also important for, especially for urban environmental historians, to capture the non-linear continuities and simultaneities, right. So, I think I find this book to be very important, because the editors they say, and the book chapters they prove that why this urban environmental history, so far as the European cities are concerned, should be more complex story of multiple transitions and layered transformations. So, we should highlight, so I am quoting the editors here. So, they say that we should highlight the many non-linear processes of urbanizing nature, the multiple temporalities and turning points, but also the long term continuities and simultaneities, and I really love this word simultaneities, right. So, parallel processes, complex parallel processes tied up with each other, which cannot be separated, which should be understood as an enmeshed whole. So, simultaneities of practices, technologies and narratives, and even the examples of reversal or regression. I will give an example, as seen for instance in the collapse of modern technology. So, for example, this book again makes us aware that that for example, in London started using coal since the 16th century, and the earlier days of the urban revolution, where we have a whole lot of stories about this Dutch golden movement, was very much propelled by peat. So, peat, how would you consider that? It should be contextualized with I mean, it should be understood as transition between organic and this fossil fuel energy transformation. So, and also like there are several examples in this book which show that how different cities from Siena to Bruges actually they kind of become networked, and because they had this piped network facility, piped water facilities, which was initially the connections were made to the municipal and monastic wells and fountains, but then it also reached the private households, and this is something which started taking place in some of the cities long back, since the dawn of the 13th century. So, I mean, so this modernity, the lens of modernity is important, but at the same time it is important for historians to look beyond modernity. So, this is one. The second is that when new systems were introduced, it does not mean that everywhere the old actually absolutely perished. So, it did not happen like that, because in several cities the transitions were seem to be very gradual, slow. In several cities the old systems continued and coexisted with the new system or the modern system. So, for example, again in this volume, from this volume we get to know that that when modern waste management was introduced. So, for example, when the closed metabolism was replaced, and the collection, the waste was no more collected and kind of disposed in the municipal landfills, but rather in more sanitary landfills. But the way the scavengers, they started searching and sorting waste, it was a very pre-modern system actually. But then this system also continued in several European cities at least till 1960s, and the Europeans till date they celebrate this practice and the scavengers. For example, Germany, there is a festival day dedicated to them, to this social group, and this is so much there. This has entered into the folkloric tradition for at least for Germany. So these are significant things which I mean these are they cannot be applied at scales, but they are specific stories, they are specificities which historian must engage into and make other social science disciplines or I mean planning circles about these specific trajectories which were unfurled as cities started making their transition from one political mode of economic mode of production to the other. So, the key themes of this book are nature into urban hinterlands, flows, this we have discussed sufficiently I guess in the last lecture. So, the co-evolution of cities with their physical environment and the far-flung implication of cities on their wider environments, and the city nature relationship beyond the urban territory, and when a flow remain a sustainable flow or metabolic flow, and when it can actually get transformed into a kind of a truncated flow. So, this we know now quite a lot I guess. Then the second theme I think this book discusses is nature as urban resource. So, how resources are produced and mobilized as well, and long term changes and continuities in resource flows, technological systems to control flows, and how technology also in turn gets affected with with resource flows for that matter. Then nature as urban challenge. So, role of experts and construction of a bit of this techno chauvinist element, and we will discuss this in detail. I am feeling already excited now by now that that yes, I will definitely discuss this South Asian urban environmental history, and we will see that what kind of responses were elicited by particular cities and the various actors, what kind of role did the native actors also play in this whole story, in this game, in different metropolitan cities of India as well, when technologies were actually transplanted. And in this volume, as I have already discussed, the work by Davids, where he discusses these three case studies, Barabia, Philadelphia and Mexico, and the kind of impact, the different variegated impacts that these cities kind of were exposed to when top down technologies were implemented as part of environmental engineering. And finally, visions of urban nature. So, vulnerability and resilience of past societies. Is it important for us to kind of unfold the past history of disasters? What kind of contribution can this make? This is significant. They argue why, and they argue in this book that why this kind of a research, disasters in history, kind of provides an overview of research into disasters from a historical perspective. So, it introduces the field of disaster studies to history. On the other hand, it also introduces historians to the topic of disaster and the field of disaster studies, and this is so very important. And this book actually it enriches approaches in contemporary study of disasters and approaches and methodology employed in the discipline of history. So, it parallelly kind of enriches disaster studies and also historical studies on disasters. Multi-layered, multivariated narratives. What is not natural in natural hazards? The major question raised by political ecologists and answered by historians through a detailed, robust, temporal scale of analysis. And I have taken this quote, again a long one, from this book, and this book is a recent one just published last year, and by the time the world was torn apart, it was turned upside down by this pandemic which we are still encountering. And in the introduction authors argue that at the very least the COVID-19 pandemic shows again how both overemphasis on inevitable mechanistic frameworks and processional narratives about progress and technology are unfounded and obscure the real effects on people, more particularly the different effects on different groups of people. So, this requires a better, deeper understanding of the causes of resilience and vulnerability of societies in the face of natural hazards, to which this book with analysis based on the historical record hopes to. So, why history is important? And there are a whole lot of there are parts and components dedicated to urban disasters. So, we have discussed the expansion of the field by taking into consideration the research recent advancements and in research directions in EUH. We have also these books, if you go through these books, it also talks about and validates why European urban environmental history is also a kind of a distinct subdomain within the domain of urban environmental history, because the European cities, they have a relative political economy, the collective leadership history is also very different, and they are very dense conglomeration, which also laid the context for the deployment of modern utilities or infrastructures. So, it is an altogether distinct experience, and that is why it needs distinct frame of analysis. So, and very recently European urban environmental historians, they have borrowed from and they have enriched, they have been enriched by the other fields like political ecology, environmental justice perspectives, and this European urban environmental history. If you see the works now, very recent works, you will the book chapters that are discussed here, you will see that how historians have become European urban environmental historians have become ever more dedicated to reform urban research. So, they really want to develop a kind of sustainability oriented urbanism, and this is how they are dedicated and motivated to kind of complement the theories and understanding of the urban experts, designers, planners and architects. So, and this establishes quite well that why urban environmental history should be regarded as a conceptual breakthrough, and why anyone or everyone discussing the urban, working with the urban, really need to consider temporal scalar analysis as significant if they really want to kind of develop sustainability oriented urbanism. Thank you.